A young man walked into a psychologist's office. He was wearing bell-bottom trousers. He had dreadlocks, beads around his neck, and he was smoking a joint. The psychologist said to him, "Well, you say you're not a hippie, so why the garb?" The young man said, "Well, that's what I'm here to find out." Last evening, it was suggested that in these 3 mornings together, there would be stories that create a tripod for us on which it's possible that we might be able to rest some awareness, some understanding, each for ourselves. So this is the second of those stories. But it's also been suggested that in the way of stories, every character, every archetype, and every symbol in every story represents a part of ourselves. So remembering this is the second story to create our little tripod. And it's a story told in a time long ago in the great country of China. And at that time there was a lord, a duke in fact, who was in charge of rather a large province under a great emperor. Now he was a fair man, he was a kind man, and he ruled well. But one day, one of his advisors came to him and said, "Sire, I have a friend who would like to be in your employ." So the Duke said, "Well, what abilities does he have?" And the advisor said, "Well, he doesn't really have any abilities." "Well, what qualifications does he have?" said the Duke. And the advisor said, "He doesn't really have any qualifications either." "Well, what talents does he have?" "None that I can think of," said the advisor. But the Duke was a very kind man. So he said to the advisor, "Well, I'll take him in. We'll make sure that he's fed and clothed and taken care of with a small stipend." So the man, who was called SuanLi, came into the abode of the Duke. And he was well taken care of. He was fed and clothed and given a small stipend to take care of his elderly mother. And the time passed. The province was very prosperous. But then one day the Duke made an announcement. He said, "I need a volunteer to go to the far reaches of our province, because there is a town in which the townspeople owe me a great amount of back taxes." So as it happened, SuanLi volunteered to take on this job. So preparations were made, and SuanLi said, "Well, please, what I need are a small number of soldiers to accompany me. I need the documentations to prove that these debts are owed to you." And so all of this was provided to him. And then SuanLi said to the Duke, "Now, please, sire, will you tell me what you want me to do with the monies that are collected on your behalf?" And the Duke said, "Well, I can't think of anything that I need just at the moment, but go around my palace and have a look and see if there's anything that you can see that you think I would want. And you can purchase it for me." So SuanLi, taking his documentation with him, and in the company of a small group of soldiers, he set out on the rather long journey. It was quite a distance away, this small town at the edge of the province in which the Duke was the overlord. And when he arrived there, he had the soldiers gather all the townspeople together in the town square to make the announcement that he was there on behalf of the Duke to claim the taxes that were due to this liege. Now SuanLi could see that the people were very sad. This was not a prosperous place at all. In fact, the people were very poor. But there were those who bought what money they could afford, and they handed it to SuanLi, who collected it. But then there were many who did not even have the means to be able to repay even a small amount of what it was said was owed to the Duke. So there was an aura, a feeling, a cloud of sadness over the whole town. But then SuanLi had a thought, and he gathered all the people together, and he gathered all of the papers that were the proof of the amount of debt that was owed, and in front of all the people, the townspeople, he tore up each and every piece of paper denoting the debts that were owing. And he even gave back to the townspeople who had been able to give small amounts, the tokens of what was owed, back to the people. And SuanLi stood up and said, "I am acting on behalf of the Duke to give you this largesse." Now the people cheered and said en masse, "Long live the Duke! Long live the Duke!" So SuanLi went back with his small entourage of soldiers, and when he came back into the presence of the Duke asked him, "Did you fulfill the task that you volunteered to undertake on my behalf?" And SuanLi said, "Yes, I did." And then the Duke asked, "Well, then what is it that you purchased for me with that which you gathered?" And SuanLi explained that he did not buy anything, and he then elucidated on what it was that had occurred. He said, "On your behalf, sire, I called on the power of Yi to set free these people." Now the Duke knew the meaning of Yi. Its meaning is righteousness. Now the Duke was not very happy about this. Even knowing the meaning of this Yi, his expectation had been to receive something tangible. But he brushed it off And he said to SuanLi, well, let's not speak about that matter any longer. And so it was cast aside. But it was not too long afterwards that the Duke fell out of favour with the Emperor of the land. So he was cut off from this mentorship, so to speak. And of course, in that position as Duke and Lord, he had many enemies that were now able to have open slather with whatever they wanted to do. So the Duke was in fear, not only for his own life, but for that of his family also. He had a very great dilemma. But SuanLi, who was aware of what it was that was happening, went to the Duke and said, "Sire, I believe that I can help you. Will you allow me to lead you?" The Duke was greatly relieved. He was so pleased to be handed over this great problem to another. And so SuanLi, guiding the Duke and his family, they set out on the road to the town where SuanLi had undertaken the task. As they were close to the town, sent off messengers to let the townspeople that the Duke was arriving. Now when they came into the outskirts of the town, they found the townspeople lined up, shouting a welcoming cry to the Duke and his family. So greatly relieved was he, because he felt safe. He knew here people revered him and would ensure that his enemies would not know how to find him and his family. When the Duke and his family were safely settled in what we might call a safe house, the Duke spoke to SuanLi and said, "Before I understood what ye meant, but now I have experienced it." This is the second leg in our little tripod. But as it was with yesterday morning, it's again asked of you. What is the deep meaning of this story? What does the power of ye, or the word righteousness, mean for us? Perhaps as those of you who would like to be with Dee and Lead to receive the translation, we can again, if you will, share what arises for you